Hey guys.
Hi Dale.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
What are you drinking today?
The huge.
Oh, dark and black with the fruit chaser.
So, how are you guys doing?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
How are you?
Well, thank you for asking, Sean. I've been thinking a lot about life lately. You know, just last Sunday I talked a little bit about worry, and when I think about worry and life itself, I think, there's a lot to worry about. And sometimes I worry about things like the weather. Sometimes I worry about people in my life. Sometimes I worry about my grandkids. But life can be really good, and then sometimes it can be not so good. And I found that if you worry too much, it's probably really not going to help, and it's really not worth it. So, when you think about life, guys, I think it's a lot like my cup of coffee and my chaser. Sometimes life is, black and dark, but we can always count on the sweet love and grace of Jesus. Hey everybody, want to welcome you to Happy Hour with Pastor Dale. And if you haven't been here before, we're excited to have you here today. Some time ago, some years ago actually, I had envisioned taking an opportunity to invite somebody from the community that comes from the professional world who might be able to address topics that we deal with in this church. And I know that if we deal with them in this church, there are people outside of this church that deal with them as well. So about once a month, on the first Tuesday of the month, we have tried to have one of these gatherings, and we are going to talk when we do gather about tough topics, but we're going to do so with love and grace. And so I'm so glad that you are here this afternoon or this evening. Want to welcome those who are watching on live stream and who will be watching in the coming days and weeks. And let's welcome Chuck Bergeson, who is here with us. And before we get started, we were kind of joking before we went live here that Chuck is a little bit of a celebrity around some in our church. He knows lots of folks in this community and has been an important resource and tool, I think, by the hand of God to help people for some years in this community. Chuck currently is a licensed addiction counselor at Southeast Human Services, and I am just thrilled to have you here. So thank you for giving us an hour or so of your time.
I'm glad to be here too, Dale.
Yeah. So tell us, I told them where you work, but tell us what you would like us to know about you first.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a professional, I've been working in the field for about 12 years now, counseling with all ages, ranges, started with adolescent outpatient, and today working with what I would consider probably the most challenging and most needed population, would be the homeless population, severely addicted today. So I've enjoyed the work. I've found it to be a real purpose that I serve, and I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. So I'm passionate about bringing education to those individuals I work with. I think it's really important to understand what they're dealing with, what they're struggling with. There's a lot of shame, stigma that surrounds addiction, substance use, and I think with some good information, some truth, that can be hopefully overcome easier than just, blindly going about your life and making what we sometimes feel like are just huge mistakes and grave sins. So.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm very appreciative of Southeast Human Services, and we share a lot of people that we work with here at Lighthouse, mm-hmm. and I know a lot of them receive services at Southeast Human Services, and they're going through some changes right now, mm-hmm. but we appreciate everything that you and the folks there do for the population that we serve downtown here. So thank you.
You're welcome. And it's been really nice to have community support in peer supports and care coordinators in the community, because, the more hands makes light work.
Yeah, lighter work, that's for sure.
So.
Yeah. So, Chuck, I have heard you, I think, a couple of times talk about the brain disease of addiction and how the brain works in regards to addiction. And I've been telling our church now for a few weeks to come or to watch this, because when I first heard it, it was the first time I really understood what I was told when I was told that I have a brain disease, a disease of addiction. And it was so helpful for me, and in fact, even kind of freeing to a degree, to understand, that what's going on in me is partly biological. And so we're going to do something that we haven't done at Happy Hour. I'm not going to just sit here and ask a bunch of questions at first. I wanted to give Chuck an opportunity to do a little bit of the talk that I have heard him do, and share a little bit about how the brain works, and then we'll ask some questions. So, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so go to it however you want. I'll just back away a little bit here.
Okay. So, yeah, just the background of addiction is, AA's been around a long time, and before AA, people just thought it was a demon. It was possession. It was being crazy. Can you turn up the mic just a little bit? The idea that that people make poor choices and people make good choices. And for most people, it's not that hard to make a choice that makes sense, that leads to health, that leads to happiness. So when individuals are using substances and it's causing major destruction in their lives, it's really hard for somebody who doesn't understand to say, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why would you keep doing that? And lead you to just trying to draw some conclusions. And I think, how would I say, common knowledge doesn't really fit well with this because of our own personal experience. So when in 1950 or something like that, the American Medical Association recognized alcoholism as a disease. So it's been since the 1950s that we've seen, well, this is a disease and people are struggling with the disease, but they're still locking people up today for what is a disease, because it presents itself in a behavior. Disease like diabetes, does it have behaviors with it? Does this person's blood sugars have them doing something that's terribly dangerous to their body, to their own body? But when we see individuals using substances, a lot of the unhealthy behaviors start affecting the community around them, the loved ones. And maybe that's the same with diabetes. It might be tricky to deal with somebody who's not taking care of their disease very well and watching them kind of suffer from it. And I think that's where families get involved with substance use disorder. We suffer from it. Individuals with substance use disorders suffer from it. But the people around them also feel like they're suffering with them. They're suffering as a result of their behaviors and actions. So why do people that have substance use disorders make these unhealthy choices? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, and I think it's really hard unless you have a substance use disorder to even know what that's like. Because when a regular normal person uses, say, substances like alcohol, which is a central nervous depressant, alcohol is supposed to make you tired. It's supposed to make you sick. It's actually a poison. The World Health Organization identified a few years ago that it's a class 1 carcinogen. I don't know why we still sell it or consume it, but it's really actually just poison. But here in America, it's something that pairs well with your fish or steak, right? So it should make you slow down, and individuals sometimes when they drink alcohol, they get excited. they get ramped up. They get really social and talkative and want to go dance and have a good time. And when you're drinking something that should make you go down and you start going up, well, that's different. That doesn't follow with common sense. And then the same thing is with individuals who use opiates, like narcotics, heroin, fentanyl, things like that we hear about in the news. Most of us, if we were to have a small amount of what individuals on the street are using, we would be asleep. We would not be able to be woken up. We would be down for the count. And individuals that use these substances fairly regularly actually can't get up and do anything until they've had it. So again, common sense doesn't really fit really well with what we know with our own experience. And then vice versa with stimulants like central nervous stimulants like methamphetamine and cocaine, those kinds of things, they cause your heart beat faster. They cause you to breathe faster. They cause you to want to do, want to go, want to be energetic. And for most people so this area of the brain it's called the pons. It's your brain stem, and it basically regulates all of your organ functions, like your heartbeat, your breathing. So when individuals use substances, normally alcohol should bring you down, and then stimulants should bring you up. But individuals that have an abnormal response to substances have a huge benefit. I've heard a lot of people who use methamphetamine finally say their first experience with it made them feel like normal for the first time. That for most of their life, they've been crawling out of their skin and feeling like they just don't fit in. And until they've had this substance that's supposed to turn you into a maniac and like be out of control, finally gets them comfortable enough to sit down and relax for a minute. So when we think about, those two experiences right there, it really helps some of us to say, well, I really don't know anything about substance use disorders, I guess, because that doesn't make any sense to me at all. So this goes into understanding, why individuals might make some really poor choices when it comes to substance use. So there's a couple of different things that happen, and I've already kind of talked about central nervous stimulants. Those are the ones that go up. And then central nervous depressants, those are the ones that go down. And those would be meth and cocaine, and I guess I'll put caffeine on there too, right? Ouch. Nicotine, that's another one that is a stimulant. There's a couple other ones, but those are the main forms, right? And then central nervous depressants, you're talking about alcohol, opiates, I guess benzodiazepines. Marijuana is kind of in its own classification. They consider it a hallucinogen, but it really does different things for different people.
Interesting.
Our brain has huge systems in place, so like when a person uses an opiate, it plugs into certain nerve endings that are like opiate receptors. So like if you're learning about the brain, you'd be like, wait a second, there's opiate receptors in the brain? There's nicotinic receptors in the brain. There's an entire cannabinoid system. So it's almost like individuals who know and learn about the brain learned about the brain through the result of what substances do and where they react in the brain. So THC sits in this endocannabinoid system and plays a huge role in these ones where there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is like a fight or flight center. It's an emotional center of the brain. So individuals that have like poor stress responses as children, they didn't know how to self-soothe, they never learned maybe, their parents didn't teach them. Or, again, with my belief system and my understanding and education, they're born that way. That part of the brain is just on alert. And I think for maybe somewhere along the line, evolutionarily, that would have been a great thing to have if you were one of the watchmen of the village, if you were one of the caretakers and you had to make sure everything was getting done on time and as it should, make sure that the entire community is staying safe. You want to be on alert all the time. But I think in today's society, when we have all the food we need, when most of us have all the shelter that we need, we've got the safety of the public police system, honestly, we don't really have to be worried about much. Most of us who have stable lives and happy, healthy homes, there's no reason to be worried. The bills are going to get paid and everything like that, but a lot of people who struggle with stress, anxiety, those kinds of things, when they have some first experiences with alcohol, opiates, and benzodiazepines, they're like, that's beautiful. I really like what that's doing for me. I'm not worried about anything anymore. And I've been worried my whole life. So they're like, wow, that makes sense. I'm going to do that again. So it stores a really strong memory. And in that memory gets accessed over and over. What did I do last time I got stressed out? What did I do last time I felt like I was crawling out of my skin? Oh yeah, I can do that again. And then the response again is identical. It's trustworthy. When you take that substance, it has that effect every single time. People are complicated. Even loved ones, family members. We might not know what we get from one day to the next, but that bottle, that pill, same thing every time. So it's almost like a trusted friend. It's a counselor, right? It's a therapist. And then on the other side, the central nervous stimulants, I for some reason really strongly believe it has a lot more to do with an area of the brain called the ventral tegmental area. So I'm just going to abbreviate. You don't have to remember much of this, but there's this place that is born within us that has natural drive. You could call it biological memory. As a child, when you're born out of the womb, you have jobs to do already. I can't remember anything before the age of 2 or 3, right? But if you took a baby out of the womb, you cut the cord, clean it up, and you put it on a mother's abdomen, it'll orientate itself and climb to the nipple and feed all by itself. You don't got to teach it any of that. And so it comes out of the womb with what appears to be knowledge, but it's drive. It's the will to survive. So the ventral tegmental area has this will to survive in it. It has thirst. It has hunger. It has fear. It has loneliness. It has boredom. So that ventral tegmental area makes us feel and experience all these things: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, if you've ever heard that before. And those are drives. They drive us to go seek reconciliation. So when I'm thirsty, I get something to drink. When I'm hungry, I find something to eat. So a lot of us use these terms, but you could interchange any of these terms with the word craving. Okay, so this is something that I try to help other individuals that haven't personally experienced substance use disorders try to understand what craving is. right? Right now, it's really hard. You guys got to look delicious meatballs and pretzels, and I know there's sugar and creamer up there, but right now I'm fasting as part of my Lenten practice. And I'm craving that. That's part of my craving. But to me, I'm pretty good with craving. I've been trying to deal with it the best I can for the last 19 years. I'm in recovery myself, so I understand what craving is. And but it's hunger. That's all it is. It's thirst. That's all it is. And I can give into it if I want, if I need. But individuals that don't understand craving, how would you want to use a substance like meth when you know that your use of meth has led to you being hospitalized, has led to you having your children removed from your home, have led to you maybe even becoming homeless yourself? It doesn't make sense that you'd keep using that substance. But try going a day without eating, right? If you could, just maybe that's not a good idea if you have some history of eating disorders or things like that, but I challenge anyone in the room, try going 12 hours without eating. You can include the 8 hours of sleep too. 8 hours of sleep, 4 hours of being awake, and don't eat anything. It's a lot harder than you think if you've never done that. But so that's kind of just another word for craving. So in individuals who have a genetic predisposition, and I might use that word again, genetic predisposition, you're born with the genes, you're predisposed to this experience, that, you know what, right now, I don't have to think about what causes this place to get quiet and calm down. I don't have to access this memory to find out if I'm hungry, what I can use to get rid of that hunger. Because if you've ever met or talked to anybody with substance use disorders, severe and substance use disorders, if they're thirsty, hungry, afraid, lonely, or bored, if they use a substance, they're less of these things, and sometimes none of these things. It takes care, I'll throw some air quotes around it, it takes care of all of it like that. And, on the outside looking in, we're like, well, it doesn't really take care of it, Chuck. That's not taking care of it. But inside here, it's taking care of it. So it's almost, again, this is the area of the brain that's in charge of survival. And I don't know, does my body know it's surviving, or does my mind know it's surviving? And if my mind's not functioning, if my mind is functioning abnormally, I'll say it that way. If my brain is functioning abnormally and I use a substance and my brain tells me that that substance is what is keeping me alive, it's taking care of all of my needs, I'm going to just keep using that substance. You can try and talk me out of it, but every time I use it, it works. It works. I'll throw some air quotes around it again. So the most insidious part about this disease, is being a brain disease, is it controls our choice. It controls our behavior. This is what makes me pick this up, pull this off, and draw a picture. But like today, this prefrontal cortex is what helps me to, I guess, decide on what I talk about next. This is the part of the brain that's in charge of decisions, right? It's in charge of insight, judgment, right? And this part of the brain develops over the course of our early life. So from the age of 0 to the age of about 25, it starts as a child, and then by the time, I'll say, women around the age of 23 and men around the age of 25. Women mature faster than men. Women make better mature choices before men do. But if this period of development of the prefrontal cortex is interrupted by regular or continuous substance use, this part of the brain doesn't develop as as it should have. It stops developing. And so you stop getting better at making decisions, you stop getting better at using insider judgment, and it sometimes stalls out at that age. So if you started using substances at 13, 14, 15, you could be a 40-year-old man who's acting like a kid, who's acting like an adolescent, who's throwing a temper tantrum if they don't get what they want. Yelling, screaming, hitting, kicking. It sounds almost like not an adolescent even, it almost sounds like a toddler or a child. And the reality is not only does this stop developing, but it also regresses. So this becomes a real challenge for individuals in early and ongoing recovery, because even if they're a 45-year-old man, after about 3 months, after the individual stops using substances, that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, starts to come back, starts to kind of work, start making better choices, like that craving. Oh, I'm hungry right now. I need to get some meth, because when I used meth, I wasn't. Oh, wait a second. That's right. Meth gets me locked up. Maybe I'll go get a cheeseburger, right? So that's that decision, and it takes a while. It's not like, duh, don't use meth, man. It's ruined your life. It's like, wait a second. Let me think about this. And that's 3 months. After a year of abstinence, this individual's brain, prefrontal cortex, will start functioning at the same level it did when they started using, right? So even after a year of being sober or abstinent, clean, whatever language you guys are familiar with, that individual is going to be, at best, their best that they ever were. So I don't really have really good information on or research on what that looks like moving forward, but there are some indicators that suggest that after about 5 years of abstinence, after about 5 years of recovery rates finally stabilize. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 18 months, even 3 years, recovery rates are still not that impressive at all. It isn't truly until after about 5 years. So that helps me to believe that there's some, what they call it, neuroplasticity, big word for the brain being able to develop past adolescence, past early adulthood. So maybe after 5 years of this 40-year-old staying sober, he can start acting like a 20-year-old. And 20-year-olds, they get up, they go to work, they go to their classes, they go to college. 20-year-olds can function on their own, they can live on their own, they can meet the love of their lives, whatever it is. At 20 years old, you got half a chance, right? I always say that about my son. If my son makes it to 25, he's in the clear. But before that, it's a crapshoot. Because he's got my DNA. He's got his mother's DNA, and we both have severe and substance use disorders in our genes. So if he does make a decision to use substances, he's going to receive a benefit like he shouldn't because of that abnormal reaction.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So you talked about the genetic predisposition of addiction. And you just mentioned, that your child, my children, will have that. Is that located somewhere in the brain specifically? And is there knowledge of how that works yet?
Yeah, I actually thought about that yesterday. I was like, I should try to remember or memorize that. It's like they've isolated the strand of the part of the DNA that is the addiction gene. So maybe that's at some point in time, and I'm not sure if a medical provider would do that today. I know they do a lot of genetic testing to see if we're predisposed to certain diseases. But I don't think they identify that one yet because it's not something most people want to know or need to know.
I also know, just because we met a couple of weeks ago and talked about today, that you believe that that addiction or substance use disorder is just largely a genetic predisposition disease.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to put you on a spot because we know this is online forever. So
Yeah.
everybody in the world's going to see it.
That's fine. I'm at a church.
Yeah, we give grace.
It'll be forgiven.
Yeah, but I do want you to talk about that because I think that is important for
Yeah.
us to kind of wrestle with and know a little bit
Yeah,
about.
so in my education, early education, 12, 13 years ago now, in university, they're showing me research of these things called the twins studies. So the only way to truly find out the difference between two people is to have a control group. So the only way to find a control group with humans that have the same DNA is twins, identical twins. So they go out and they search all this information from all these identical twins that they can find, and they ask them all these questions. You know, where did you grow up? What state did you grow up in? How tall are you? What color are your eyes? What was your socioeconomic status? Did you grow up in a home that was poor or rich? Did you go to church? Where did you work? And when it was all said and done and they took all this information and synthesized it, they could tell that people that developed substance use disorders were, how did they say it? They were 4 times more likely to develop a substance use disorder if they had one parent who had a substance use disorder. And if both of the parents had a substance use disorder, they were 7 times more likely than average to develop a substance use disorder themselves. So we got to find out the averages. So there's a lot of math involved, so follow with me. Over the course of the last 5-6 decades, we do research on how many people have substance use disorders within our population, and it hovers right around 8 to 9%. It's never been much more, and it's never been much less. So if I round that up to 10% of the population has a substance use disorder. So if you have one parent, you have a 40% chance of developing a substance use disorder yourself. 2 parents, a 70% chance of developing a substance use disorder yourself. And other research went on to suggest that somewhere between 60 to 80% of individuals who have substance use disorders can relate it directly to their genes. 60 to 80%. Now, I've been practicing in the field for 12 years, and I've run thousands and thousands of groups. And I have worked with thousands of people. And every once in a while in a group, I'll ask a group like this size, how many of you have a parent who has a substance use disorder? Most everybody raises their hand. How many of you have both parents? A large majority raise their hands to that one too. And every once in a while, there'll be one person who will be like, nope. I'm like, and I kind of wonder, what are you doing here then? How do you have a substance use disorder? I'm like, so nobody in your family? He goes, well, you know, I had some aunts and uncles and maybe a couple of grandfathers. I'm like, okay, well, so, okay. Or like, so neither of your parents? No. Did they smoke cigarettes? Yeah. Okay, there it is. That's as easy as it is. Because they've proven that with mice. You take a group of, let's say 100 mice, you cut them in half. Here's 50 over here, 50 over here. You give these mice nicotine their whole life and then let them breed, and then you just let these ones be okay. And then you get rid of the adults and you take their offspring. And then you give both groups heroin. This group touches it, samples it, whatever. This group over here, just go to town. And then they never stop. They OD and they die. And that's all because their parents were exposed to nicotine. So, and it's genes. They didn't watch their parents use heroin and learn how to use heroin. They tasted it and it did something to their brain. So it's wired for it, right?
That's so interesting. So those of us with a substance use disorder, our brain deals with the chemicals differently than those who do not.
Differently, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I say abnormally. It's not a normal reaction.
Okay.
Another individual famous guy, Dr. Drew, you guys might know him. He's got some information out there that suggests that it's an evolution, that it's actually a good thing. It's interesting how he presents it because he's like, and I think it has more to do with these central nervous stimulant guys because he's like, well, when the hijacker's on the plane and they're going to take the plane down and everybody sits in their seats, these guys are the ones that get up and attack. These ones are the ones that run down the middle and try to barge into the cockpit and take the plane back. Normal people just get their cell phone out. Yeah, I love you, honey. I might never see you again.
Sure.
And these guys are taking over the world, and some of the most successful and famous people that we know out there have histories of substance use disorders. George W. Bush is an alcoholic, goes to AA. He's president of the United States. Elon Musk is a tragically, terribly addicted individual who's ruined many relationships, marriages, but he's also considered one of the richest men in the world. So substance use disorders aren't necessarily a terrible thing, but when it comes to the way that those individuals use substances, it is.
It can be terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in many ways, we can say it is what it is. If you have a substance use disorder, you have an illness that needs to be treated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea that it's considered an illness or a disease, but it fits with it because it causes destruction. How can I say something that doesn't hurt you isn't a disease? But I think, again, it's like Spider-Man, what they say, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's, it's a tool that can be used effectively.
Do I remember learning that part of the brain response to substances is that they stop producing some of the pleasure chemicals themselves that make us feel okay, like serotonin? Do substances do that? Or is that something different that happens with other issues?
I think it's not necessarily the substance that does it, but the way that the brain is developed and built.
Okay.
It's really, again, common sense suggests that if you use meth and you really like it, that means that it's producing all these really feel-good chemicals. Your reward system's on fire, right? And the reality is that the more research that we do, it's almost suggesting the opposite. That if you can drink a beer and be, oh, okay, and drink 2 or 3 beers and be like, and drink a 6-pack or a 12-pack and then finally be like, you're actually needing more of the substance to get there than most people need to get there with one. They're like, one, whoa. So they're getting a lot, normal people get a lot of it without, how do I say this, with small amounts of substances. And individuals that often who end up with alcoholism or an alcohol use disorder have an experience like, I could drink almost a 6-pack or more the first time I went out and drank. Like I could drink most people under the table. And that was just something that I could do. So the way the brain is to begin with does that.
Sure.
And then I think through the use of substances, individuals get spoiled or used to, like meth, man, that gives you a lot of energy. It gives you a lot of interest. Like you could do the most stupid, mundane job in the world and just have a great time doing it and feel like you could do it forever. And then when you get forced by the jails or the court system or your family to stop using meth, you're like, this sucks. I don't want to do this any longer. So, yeah, we get spoiled by it.
So you kind of already alluded to it, but can you talk a little bit about the understanding that it's progressive as well, that it gets worse? Is that something that you've seen, or how would you describe that from a brain perspective?
Yeah, that's challenging because I think, the longer an individual uses substances, it gets worse and worse. Like, I don't know how to say this. Like those individuals that have those abnormal reactions, they enjoy it at first. It adds to things, it adds to their relationships. It adds to the fun. They might go out jet skiing, right? Jet skiing's fun. And then when I start using this, jet skiing's even more fun. And then pretty soon because they're using so much of that, they can't afford the payment on the jet ski or whatever, and the jet ski goes away. So like, I'm just using the substance to have fun. And that's like part of the progression, that we have just loss of interest, impaired relationships. So given enough time, an individual who goes untreated, if their substance use goes untreated, will eventually end up hospitalized, in jail, in prison, in the grave. And that's the progressive nature of the disease. Whereas most people who end up with, even the individuals that I work with today that have these super severe end spectrum disorders, homeless, severely mentally ill, no family, no relationships, complete and utter destruction. At some point in their life, they were a normal, functioning person just like everybody else. I mean, I say that, I was just sharing that with a group today. I mean, I come from a really small town, Pembina, North Dakota. There were 15 people in my graduating class. And out of the 15 people, for sure, 14 of us all drank. And we all drank regularly. Every weekend, bonfires, after the dances, during the dances, right? And there were individuals in my class that drank excessively, like straight shots of Everclear, vodka, just blackout drunk. And if I'd have put any money on it back then with what I know, I'd have guessed 3 or 4 of those guys were just going to be dead in their 30s. Severe end alcoholism, that's all there is to it. They're normal people today with families, drinking beer during the Super Bowl. They don't have alcoholism. So alcohol doesn't cause alcoholism. You know, it's a genetic brain disease. Just like type 1 diabetes. It's a genetic disease. No matter how much crap I eat, no matter how much I don't exercise, I'm never going to develop type 1 diabetes because my parents don't have it. And that's the same thing with this. I mean, like if a school asked me to come in and do a lecture on substance use disorders and the dangers of drugs and alcohol, I just say, hand out a questionnaire and ask the students if they have a parent, aunt, or uncle, or grandparents that have substance use disorder challenges. And if they say no to that, they don't need to come. Because they can go out this weekend and they can drink. They can smoke a little bit of grass and sow their wild oats. And somewhere in their early 20s, late 20s, they're just going to chill out on it. They're just going to really stop. They're going to slow down. Life's going to change for them. They're going to get families. They're going to get careers, and they're just not going to fit in anymore. Individuals with genetic predispositions don't operate like that. They just keep going and going until they can't really go anymore, or someone says, "You're done. We are not going to let you go anymore." And that's really hard to do.
So we're going to do some question and answers in just a moment. So I'm going to see if you can answer a couple of these really quick, okay?
Okay.
You stop using the substance if you have substance use disorder, and you start off 10 years or 20 years later, and it seems like you often start back or at least get pretty quickly back to where you were. Is that part of the brain, or don't we know for sure?
I mean, I've heard all that, and I think most people, firsthand experience would say that. Not only would we start back out of where we stopped, but we would more than likely start back up as if we had never stopped.
Right.
So it's almost even worse after we start again than it was when we stopped. So it's almost like I would hypothesize that it's like the brain's just built there already. It's just a turnkey operation. It's like riding a bike. It takes you a long, long time and a lot of hard work to get used to it, to get on it, and to get good at it, and to be second nature so you could do other things while you're riding the bike, hands-free, maybe one wheel. And then you stop riding a bike for 10 years. you just get back on the bike. You don't got to learn how to do it anymore. So the progression is already there. I think that might be the only way to explain it.
All right. So we will take a few minutes for some questions. We're not going to try to get into a counseling session, but if you have questions based upon what he has shared, what Chuck has shared, or just some clarification, we would love to hear from a few of you. And if you are watching online, you can write on Facebook question as well, and we'll try to get to it. So here we go. Let's stand up. Let's identify ourselves, and then ask your question.
Hi, I'm Misty. So is there any way to stop the cycle other than just not having kids?
Not even really.
Good question.
It's a great question, and I don't know why we laugh when we hear it, but we do, because it might be a defense mechanism. Yes. I honestly, from what I know, just from simple biology and in courses in high school and in college, that recessive and dominant genes can change. Genes can be turned on and genes can be turned off by behavior in our lifetime. And I honestly do believe that with good education, we can educate our children, we can educate our offspring at the potential that they are born with and that is there. If they never pick up and use a substance during their lifetime, they won't technically they won't have a substance use disorder because you have to use substances. Will that then allow them, when they have children, to not pass that gene on because they don't have the gene now? I don't know if it works that quickly. But I think that the cycle and also culture, like it says, 60 to 80% is directly genetic. But also maybe it's not the culture. And culture, popular culture, America, right, fucking Budweiser and whatnot, we're just really predisposed to using substances. The pharmaceutical industry pushes it on us and stuff. So I think we can, through education, we can resolve it within the matter of maybe one generation or at least two. But those individuals have to make good choices on who they decide as a partner too. Right?
Other questions?
Do you think as gene-altering therapy kind of progresses that it could help prevent addiction before the child is even born?
Boy, I'm not really good at that. I mean, I've thought about different ideas of how that could look. Like they've got like amazing stem cell research and how you can inject stem cells into certain areas of the body and those stem cells can just start working. It'd be interesting to see that kind of therapy done with individuals who already have it. Like, again, that amygdala, that area that's somewhat dysfunctional, I'll say, or abnormally functioning. If a person suggests I could put stem cells in there that are normal functioning, and those stem cells grow and reproduce and cause the amygdala to function normally, then yeah, that person wouldn't really receive a benefit from that central nervous depressant. Because I think that's the tough thing that we don't understand or can't really grasp is the benefit. There's such a benefit for those individuals with that substance. Whereas most of us, it's not a benefit. Like if I were to hand out like 3 shots of vodka to like everybody in here and take one, do research, how did that make you feel? Okay, do another one. Some of you guys are like, I don't know, I don't want to do another one. Do it. Do another one. Now tell me how you feel. Be like, not good. I don't like this. I really don't like this. All right, do your 3rd one. Most of you be like, 3rd one? No way. No, thank you. And then a small percent, around 8 to 9% of you would say, well, if they're not going to have their 3rd, can I?
Just to be clear, the percentage might be a little higher in this room.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't bring any vodka with, so we're safe. We're safe. Okay?
Yeah, where do we sign up for that? Right out. Okay, got time for one or two more. There we go.
Hi there, thanks for coming in today. I'm an alcoholic and I've been sober off of alcohol for 10 years and I almost...
Congratulations!
No.
Congratulations!
Well, wait. So it got to the point fairly quickly for me. Like I would have cravings maybe once every 3 or 4 years and it would be mild. But this year I relapsed with THC and it's been an experience to where I was just as powerless as over alcohol. And the amount that I used was huge in the way that it was affecting me. I know it was different than other people. And I was able to quit for a couple months and I relapsed. And now I'm kind of in the cycle of trying to, stay away from it and not relapse. So I guess I'm just wondering, Dale did say don't ask. This isn't a counseling session.
No.
But if you just have any tips, or is there something different I could be doing, or how long am I going to be struggling with this again? Is my 10 years going to help, or?
That's a really good question. I think Dale was actually going to kind of ask a question like that, similar to like, how about if you have problems with this substance, can you use a different substance, or like maybe gambling, or there's a lot of different behavioral addictions out there. I'll say that. Now I'm a substance use disorder, so I didn't necessarily train too well on the other ones.
So I didn't ask that question just due to time, but can you answer that then? I mean, is that the same with the brain and for various addictions, or do we not know?
Man,
or you don't know.
For at least 8 to 9 years of my practice, it was just abstinence based. It was all abstinence from all substances. And it's just there's 8 sections of substances and you have to be abstinent from all of them. And that's the only way that you can be in recovery. And today I practice more of what would look like a harm reduction model, which suggests that, okay, if you had problems with alcohol and you can admit that, it's probably good that you make a decision not to use alcohol. But like now with weed, and how do you know unless you try it? So try it, and if you don't have problems with it, well then I guess it's not a problem. But if you do have problems with it, then I don't know how many different substances a person has to go through before they realize that just what it is that the substance is doing something for us. It has a benefit, again. So when I'm working with individuals, counseling and things like that, it's almost like you have to really find out what that benefit is. If you can't find out what that benefit is, you'll never figure this out. Because what you have to find out is what it's doing for you, and then you have to figure out a better way to get that need met. And if you don't figure out a better way to get that need met, you're just going to seek out a different substance to do that for you. So what I would suggest is go back to finding out before you started using that what was missing and what you were trying to fulfill by using that. And then you'll get more to the answer.
Okay, we got more hands here, so we'll try to keep going quick here. Where are you going to go?
Back there.
All right.
He had his hand up.
Hi, I'm Jeff. What about the anxiety, depression, PTSD? I work in an area where PTSD is relevant. You've got one Vietnam veteran that went and served and had what happen and becomes addicted, and then somebody that doesn't. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg, which comes first.
Yeah.
And how do you address that along with the treatment itself?
Well, the information that we have out there is just good evaluation and diagnosis. It's just like what happened in Vietnam, right? All those boys are over there fighting a war, extreme amount of trauma. Hey, there's some heroin. Let's use that. It helps me get through this. But when they come back to stateside, these junky heroin addicts over there, just drop it. They don't use it anymore. They all still have the trauma. They all still have the experience. It's just that substance really doesn't do it for them. So again, chicken or the egg is your genetic predisposition. I can almost, like with those gentlemen that I went to school with that I was talking about, if I'd have looked at their family history, I wouldn't have been concerned at all that they were going to become alcoholic. And it's the same thing with trauma. I think unfortunately sometimes people get information and they start running with it. I don't know if any of you guys have been familiar with or heard the ACEs studies, adverse childhood experience. And they suggest that if you have 3 or more of these adverse childhood experiences, you're much more at a higher risk of developing a substance use disorder in your lifetime. And I would say that's not causal. It's correlation. Most individuals have adverse childhood experiences, grow up in homes with parents who have substance use disorders. That's why there's adverse childhood experiences. And then they go on to develop substance use disorders, not because they had adverse childhood experiences, but when they used substances, it did something for them that it doesn't do with normal people. And in the research that suggests which comes first, nothing comes first. Depression doesn't lead to substance use disorder, but if you're listening to what I'm saying today, anxiety leads to a benefit. And if you have anxiety, you're more likely to benefit. I don't know if that's correlation or causation, because the reality is a psychiatrist or a doctor is going to prescribe this for this. And some of those individuals will just take their Klonopin as directed, and some of them will take them excessively, and then when they run out of the prescription and can't get a refill, we'll go find something on the street. And the difference between those two individuals, 100% genetic predisposition to substance use disorder.
So we're going to actually wrap up. So we've gone over time, which doesn't surprise me. I knew this would be very informative. How about we have Chuck come back sometime, and we'll continue the conversation. So if he's willing, so you know, the people who have come and shared with us, they do it voluntarily, and we sure appreciate this time. This has been very informative. And I want you to know that if you or somebody you know is struggling with a substance use disorder, that there is a lot of help. And we didn't even get into that, but Southeast Human Services, other programs of treatment. Lighthouse Church is a church with a variety of anonymous programs, as well as faith-based programs to help people who are struggling with substance use disorder. And just reach out for some help if you are in that situation. I do want to just quickly announce, do we have a slide for our next guest? Our next guest is going to be Yvette Anderson, who works for the state of North Dakota, specifically as a clinical director for Free Through Recovery program that our church works with, and she's going to be here, and we're going to talk. We kind of dealt with this right at the end about trauma-informed care and what trauma does for us, and how we can interact with one another in regards to trauma. So that will be April 4th. 5:30, and I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to say God bless you. Thank you for your time, and I hope that this was beneficial, and I hope you come back in April. So thank you.